If you could think with perfect precision for just 60 seconds, you would abandon everything, slowly draining your spirit. You wouldn't plead for a seat at tables set with crumbs. You wouldn't justify your existence to an audience that profits from your confusion. You wouldn't keep auctioning your inner peace for the cheap currency of applause, or fragmenting your soul just to squeeze into a mold crafted by other hands. You would recognize the entire design, a psychological labyrinth engineered to keep you distracted, compliant, and predictable. And the instant you stepped back, the moment your mind grew silent and sharp like a honed blade, you'd become a threat. Because lucid thought incinerates manipulation. It rips the costume off false emergencies, counterfeit loyalty, and staged affection. So ask yourself right now, how many of your choices are authentically yours? How many were passed down, demanded, or simply expected? This isn't about thinking harder, it's about thinking cleaner. That's the heart of Stoic practice. Not cold indifference, but the disciplined pursuit of truth. It's stripping away illusion until your thoughts belong to you again. If you're exhausted by living in constant reaction, by being governed by static, then right here is where the pivot begins. And if you're ready for that shift, consider joining us. Subscribing to Stoic Mindset Mastery can be a quiet act of defiance, a signal to your future self that you selected lucidity over bedlam, discipline over diversion, and a mind that no external force can subtly command. Most individuals assume they're thinking when they are merely reacting. The distinction is subtle yet monumental. A genuine thought is deliberate, it is constructed, shaped, scrutinized, and owned. But reactions, they are swift, automatic, and nearly always camouflaged. They wear the mask of cognition, but beneath they are just emotional reverberations. Someone elevates their tone and suddenly you're defensive. A decision looms and you feel anxiety's cold grip. So you evade it. You label it prudence, caution, strategy, but trace it back. That wasn't a choice. It was a triggered reflex, a flash of feeling masquerading as wisdom. We exist in a culture that prizes velocity, not profundity. In that rush, there's no allowance for a pause. Everything is now, urgent, deafening, but clarity cannot breathe in chaos. Clear cognition doesn't sprint, it steps back. It inquires, where did that sensation originate? What am I presuming to be true? Most never pose these questions. They never interrogate the internal monologue because they assume it's their own. But often, it's not. It's the voice of a parent you aimed to please, a crowd you dreaded, a belief you absorbed without conscious consent. Unknowingly, your mind transforms into a theater, performing everyone else's script except your own. The Stoics taught that emotion isn't the adversary. The adversary is unexamined emotion. As Epictetus revealed, we are disturbed not by events, but by the views we take of them. That statement contains a severe kind of liberation, because if your judgment crafts your suffering, then your clarity can dismantle it. But first, you must slow down sufficiently to see your true driver. Most never arrive there. They feel anger and assume another caused it. They feel shame and assume they merit it. They feel anxious and assume a tangible threat exists. Yet each of those emotions originates with a belief. And if the belief is flawed, the emotion misleads. There is no lucidity in that loop, only repetition. The same disputes, the same collapses, the same regrets. And still, people name it living. But if you are ignorant of your reaction's roots, how can you ever claim your choices as your own? Reflect on the instances you've decided something merely to sidestep discomfort, the agreements forged from guilt, the silences you kept not from accord, but because your physiology feared disapproval. That isn't choice, that's survival dressed in etiquette. Over years, that habit crystallizes into personality. You aren't calm, you've just conditioned yourself to smother the fire. You aren't indecisive. You've just learned to mistake discomfort for danger. So what does authentic thinking resemble? It looks like tension, like friction, like decelerating when everything else accelerates. It's uneasy because clarity demands confrontation. You must face the mirror's reflection, not the socially acceptable version, but the one still hauling ancient wounds, old fears, and outdated programming. You must become ruthlessly honest about your internal machinery. Why do specific individuals trigger you? Why do you evade certain dialogues? Why do you replay identical cycles even when you know better? Clarity starts to crystallize when you cease blaming the world for your reactions and begin questioning their source, not in a self-punishing way, but in a self-liberating one. Because the instant you realize your reaction is not the final verdict, it's merely the opening bid, you start reclaiming command. You stop being a marionette for your own conditioning. You stop surrendering power in every exchange, every debate, every decision. You stop permitting feelings to make choices for you. You begin to hold a space, however slender, between stimulus and response. And in that space, your mind becomes your own once more. But clarity doesn't yell, it murmurs. It asks you to observe without racing to conclusion. It invites you to sit with unease long enough to discern its composition. It shows you the mind is not a battlefield of emotions to vanquish, but a landscape to comprehend. That's the Stoic way, not to eradicate feelings, but to perceive them clearly, to strip away the delusion that your initial impulse is invariably correct, because most often it isn't. Your first impulse is the loudest, but rarely the wisest. True thinking asks you to wait, to step back, to witness how your body tenses, your breath shortens, your thoughts race, and then, only then, to respond with intent, not reflex. This isn't effortless work. It is hard to tell yourself the truth when your entire life has been architected around avoiding it. But each time you select awareness over autopilot, you construct something unshakable within. You stop being the person who needs the world to change in order to find peace. You become the kind of person who carries lucidity through pandemonium. And that quality of clarity isn't just a mindset, it's a form of authority. Quiet, unassuming, but immovable. So the next instance you feel the compulsion to react, to defend, to withdraw, to retaliate, pause. Just for a heartbeat. Ask yourself, is this mine, or is this inherited? Is this truth, or merely habit? That single moment of stillness could be the watershed between reliving your past and forging your future. And that, more than anything, is what Stoic lucidity offers. The power to respond, not just react. To choose, not just comply. To think, not just feel. And when you can do that consistently, your life ceases to be a collection of reactions and starts becoming a map you are deliberately charting. Because thinking clearly isn't just about making superior choices, it's about becoming someone who doesn't require rescue from their own mind. And in a world saturated with noise, that's an exceptional form of liberty. Watch carefully and you'll witness it unfolding almost daily. Not out there, in here. You feel something, a tug, a spark, a surge of immediacy. Perhaps it's attraction, perhaps it's anxiety, perhaps it's exhilaration disguised as destiny. But whatever it is, it strikes first, fast, loud. And without even recognizing it, your mind scrambles to manufacture sense. You don't commence with reason, you commence with emotion. And reason comes limping in afterward, attempting to justify the choice your body already made. It feels right, you tell yourself. It must signify something. But what if that feeling wasn't wisdom? What if it was just familiarity? And what if the familiarity was anchored in your oldest injuries? There's a peculiar comfort in what we already know, even if what we know is pain. You might discover yourself drawn to individuals who echo your past, not because it's love, but because it's recognizable. You might feel urgency around an opportunity, not because it's aligned, but because you're terrified of missing out. You believe you're being intuitive, but you're actually being piloted by fear. And when fear leads, logic doesn't resist, it collaborates. It dons a mask and narrates a story. A beautiful, reasonable, compelling story designed not to guide you, but to shield you from feeling the terror underneath. It unfolds in relationships. You feel seen by someone and label it connection. But perhaps it's just relief. Relief that someone finally acknowledges you. And so you cling, not because it's healthy, but because you've been starving. It unfolds in career decisions. You receive an offer and your gut tightens, not because it's aligned, but because it feels scarce. So you persuade yourself it's your grand breakthrough, when really it's your grand panic. And if you glance back honestly, most of your poorest decisions didn't stem from a logic deficit. They sprang from loyalty to a feeling you never paused to question. That's the peril of unexamined emotion. It steers the car while logic decorates the dashboard. You believe you're in control, but you're really just narrating what your inner world already settled. This isn't a flaw, it's not a character defect. It's simply how the mind attempts to survive. Emotion is ancient, it's fast, instinctive, protective. But when you construct your life around its impulses, you become reactive instead of intentional. Most people dwell at the mercy of their emotional weather. They think if something feels intense, it must be important. If it hurts, it must be true. If it excites them, it must be a sign. But clarity doesn't operate that way. Clarity doesn't follow emotion. It holds it still. It lets it speak, but it doesn't let it lead. When you think clearly, you become aware of the chasm between what you want and what you're addicted to, between what feels familiar and what's authentically beneficial. And that awareness transmutes everything. You stop rushing to justify every emotional spike. You stop calling every pull a calling. You start recognizing that your brain can't always be trusted to relay the truth in the moment, especially not when it's attempting to evade pain. You slow down. You wait for the feeling to settle. You ask yourself, if I wasn't feeling this, what would I know? And sometimes the answer is agonizing. You might perceive that what you thought was love was just validation, that what you called ambition was just comparison, that what you felt was urgency was just your fear trying to outrun itself. This doesn't mean you become cold. It means you become free. Free to feel without being ruled by feeling. Free to notice emotion without obeying it. Because emotion isn't the enemy, it's intel. It's just not the full report. Like a spark, it can ignite a hearth or raise a home. The difference is whether or not you act before you think, before you pause, before you check in with what you profoundly value. Clarity requests that pause. It fabricates space between the sensation and the follow-through. And in that space, you get to choose what manner of person you are. You might still feel afraid, but you won't let fear drive the verdict. You might still feel drawn, but you'll ask what you're truly being drawn to. You'll start to discern the rift between desire and desperation, between intuition and impulse. And that awareness will feel like a loss, because it is. You're losing the illusion that feelings are facts. You're releasing the story that says, if I feel it, it must be true. And that loss is the dawn of maturity. People will instruct you to trust your gut. And sometimes, yes, your gut knows, but sometimes your gut is just your past in disguise. Sometimes your gut is just anxiety impersonating wisdom. That's why you need more than feeling. You need philosophy, you need stillness, you need internal architecture, because without it, every potent emotion becomes a tempest you cannot navigate. But with it, you become someone who can feel profoundly and still decide wisely. And that's the essence of Stoic lucidity. Not to suppress emotion, but to observe it clearly without rushing to obey it. The Stoics didn't deny feeling, they just refused to be governed by it. They practiced the pause. They trained themselves to separate the sensation from the story, so that when it came time to act, their decisions were grounded not in panic or pressure, but in purpose. That's the quality of clarity you build, not in a moment, but over time. By noticing the pattern, by catching yourself mid-justification, by asking gently, is this true or is this just familiar? And the more you ask, the more potency you gain, not the kind that dominates others, the kind that anchors you, the kind that lets you move through chaos without being hijacked by every emotional wave, the kind that sees lucidly even when the feeling is deafening. Because you've learned something most never do. Emotions are real, but they are not reliable. And until you can feel them without obeying them, you'll forever be dancing to someone else's rhythm. But when you stop dancing, when you pause, feel, and choose, you become untouchable. You're no longer dwelling in reaction. You're moving with quiet clarity, not because it feels pleasant, but because it's right. And that distinction, though invisible, is what transmutes a reactive existence into a deliberate one. It's what turns emotional noise into meaningful action. And over time, it's what renders your decisions not just smarter, but sacred. Most individuals believe they're being careful when they wait. They trust the longer they postpone, the more clarity they'll acquire. They don't perceive that what they're truly doing is waiting for certainty, a brand of perfection that doesn't exist outside their imagination. You hear it in their speech. I just need a bit more time, or once I'm sure I'll make the move. But underneath those words isn't wisdom, it's fear. And fear, when it wears logic's mask, convinces you that hesitation is safety, that the unknown is perpetually a threat, that until you envision every potential outcome, you're not prepared. But that's not clarity, that's a tactic to dodge commitment, a method to delay the unease of responsibility while feeling like you're doing something prudent. The reality is, no one is ever completely ready. Not for the pivotal decisions, not for the difficult conversations, not for the moments that demand growth. Readiness, in the way most envision it, is a myth. It's a mental loophole. You believe you're purchasing time, but you're really trading momentum for illusion. And the longer you wait, the more your mind populates the blanks with dread. You imagine the worst, you catastrophize, you act out every scenario that could fail, and soon you're no longer standing still. You're stuck, trapped in a cycle of overthinking and underliving. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." The Stoics knew the mind could be its own tormentor, that the agony we forecast is often worse than the pain we'll ever experience. But certainty addicts don't know this yet. They think if they just wait long enough, the flawless moment will arrive, the path will clear, the fear will evaporate. But it doesn't, because clarity doesn't come before action. It's born from it. You don't get clear and then move. You move, and the fog starts to lift. That's what separates the Stoic mindset from the rest. It's not recklessness, it's respect for time. It's understanding that movement itself sharpens thought. When you engage with life, when you step into discomfort, when you make the call or assume the risk, you don't become less clear, you become more aware. You learn what works and what doesn't. You feel where the resistance is genuine and where it's just fear in disguise. And that feedback, real feedback, not imagined outcomes, is where clarity begins to form. But that demands courage, not the loud variety, the quiet kind that shows up without applause, the kind that says, even if I don't know everything, I know enough to begin. That shift in posture is what turns someone from passive observer to active participant in their own life. Because when you demand certainty before acting, you're not protecting yourself. You're holding yourself hostage. You're converting your own potential into a problem to be solved instead of a path to be walked. The hunger for certainty kills momentum. It takes every spark of desire, every flash of insight, every whisper of intuition, and buries it under analysis. You start to question your own instinct. You doubt your timing. You seek external validation, hoping someone will grant you permission to leap. But no one ever will. Not fully. Because the clarity you're seeking isn't in someone else's approval. It's in your own movement, in the decision to act, knowing you might be wrong, but choosing to live anyway. That's not recklessness, that's responsibility. And that's where authentic strength is forged. Not in the perfect decision, but in the willingness to bear the weight of your choice. To declare, this is mine, I chose it, I'll face what comes. That brand of ownership doesn't come from waiting. It comes from stepping in, fully present, fully aware that outcomes are uncertain, but your intent is clean. That's what Stoicism instructs, not to wait for the world to make sense, but to act in a way that brings your own sense to the world. You don't have to know precisely how. It ends to begin. You don't need a map to take the first step, and you certainly don't need to silence all fear before moving forward. You just need to get honest about what's truly holding you back. Is it wisdom or is it avoidance? Is it reflection or is it delay? Because most often the longer you wait for clarity, the harder it becomes to act. The decision swells in your mind like a shadow, and shadows feed on time. The more you feed them, the darker they grow. But when you move, when you decide, even without full certainty, you strip away their power. You interrupt the pattern. You stop giving energy to a question that was never meant to be solved in theory, but lived in practice. And that pivot changes everything. Because you begin to trust yourself, not because you know all the answers, but because you're no longer afraid of being wrong. That's what fortifies your mind. Not perfection, but motion. Not guarantees, but growth. And even if you fail, even if the decision leads to pain, it was still the correct move. Why? Because you acted from alignment, not fear. And from that action, you learned something you couldn't have learned any other way. Something alive, something earned, something real. And that reality, however imperfect, will forever be more useful than the fantasy of certainty. Clarity, in the end, isn't a feeling. It's a posture, a way of standing in your life that says, I won't wait to be ready. I'll get ready by moving. It's not about always being right. It's about being willing to show up, to try, to adjust, to learn. And that willingness is the foundation of everything meaningful, because the person who needs every answer before they begin never begins. But the one who walks forward anyway, quietly, imperfectly, boldly, builds a life that's not only clear but deeply lived. We dwell in the information age, yet most of it leaves us more bewildered than empowered. There's no shortage of opinions, explanations, strategies, and narratives. Scroll sufficiently, and you'll discover 1,000 methods to live, think, heal, win, grow, detach, love, let go, and then restart. It feels like wisdom, but it rarely alters anything. You listen to a podcast while driving. You swipe through advice threads during lunch. You drown in the cacophony of other people's thinking. And by day's end, your head is full, but your direction remains foggy. Because clarity was never about how much you know. It's about knowing what to ignore. The truth is, most information isn't there to assist you. It's there to keep you watching, scrolling, and wanting more. It preys on your curiosity, your insecurity, your need to feel like you're doing something just by learning something. But consumption is not clarity. In fact, if you're not vigilant, it becomes the very thing that blinds you. It dulls your instincts. You stop trusting your own voice because it gets buried under 100 other voices that sound more confident, more polished, more certain. And slowly, without intent, you hand over your inner compass to people who don't even know your terrain. Clarity doesn't get constructed in a hurricane of opinions. It gets built in silence, in the space between thoughts where your own insights finally have room to surface. But we're taught to dread that silence. We fill it with noise, terrified that if we stop ingesting, we'll fall behind. But fall behind who? Behind what? The pursuit of constant input is often a camouflaged fear of decision-making. You keep gathering data because you're too scared to act on what you already know, so you tell yourself you need more. Another voice, another perspective, another rationale to delay. But if the information doesn't alter your next action, it's just noise. And noise doesn't feel hazardous until it becomes normal, until the perpetual hum of distraction is so familiar that genuine thinking feels awkward. You sit alone and your hand reaches for a device without even thinking. You feel uncertain and you open a new tab hunting for an answer. You feel pain and instead of confronting it, you search for something to label it, not to understand it, but to escape it. This isn't learning, it's avoidance wearing a sophisticated mask. Carl Jung warned we will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing our own souls. And endless information is one of the simplest ways to avoid because it feels productive. You can convince yourself you're working on yourself when really you're just looping, collecting philosophies like trophies, but never letting them transform you. Because transformation doesn't come from exposure, it comes from integration. And integration demands space, stillness, honesty, not with the world, but with yourself. You must begin filtering ruthlessly. Not everything warrants a place in your mind. Not every voice should have access to your inner world. You need boundaries, not just in your relationships, but in your consumption. You wouldn't let a stranger stroll into your home and rearrange your furniture. So why do you let random content rearrange your priorities, your beliefs, your emotional state? The most perilous voice in your life isn't always the loudest. Sometimes it's the quiet influence of unexamined input. The video you didn't question. The post that subtly shifted your perspective. The conversation that planted doubt without you noticing. This is where discipline becomes more powerful than intelligence. It's easy to collect insights. It's hard to decide what deserves your attention. The Stoics grasped this long before the digital era. They spoke of guarding the mind like a fortress, not just from assault, but from clutter. Because clutter leads to confusion, and confusion over time leads to erosion. You don't lose yourself all at once. You lose yourself in fragments, one unchecked influence at a time, one distraction that morphed into a habit, one article that seeded doubt, one piece of advice that sounded wise but led you away from what you already knew to be true. So start asking different questions. Not, is this interesting, or is this popular, but does this help me move? Does this sharpen my next decision? Does this align with what I value? And if the answer is no, let it go. Not everything warrants a response. Not every topic deserves your curiosity. Some things are loud only because they desire your energy. But clarity is quiet. It waits for those willing to mute the chaos and return to themselves. It's not about being closed-minded. It's about being intentional. Open-mindedness doesn't mean letting everything in. It means being receptive to truth and ruthless with everything else. It means knowing you can't think clearly if your mind is perpetually pulled in 10 directions. You can't know your next step if every external voice is shouting a different path. You can't feel your own intuition if it's drowned in content. And this is where authentic growth occurs, not in the rush to consume, but in the discipline to discern, in the courage to say, I've heard enough. Now it's time to listen to myself. That's not arrogance, it's maturity. It's trusting that you don't require 100 opinions to make a single meaningful decision. You need presence, you need focus, you need space. Because clarity isn't the result of information overload. It's what emerges when the noise fades, when the world grows quiet enough for your own wisdom to be heard. And if you want to live a life that mirrors your values, your truth, your power, you must protect that space like it matters, because it does. It's the foundation of every decision that shapes who you become. Clarity often feels like a mental challenge, but it begins in a physical space. You can attempt every technique, journal your thoughts, listen to wisdom, even seek silence. But if your environment is chaotic, your mind will mirror that chaos. You might believe they're separate, your desk, your phone, your space, and then your thoughts, your moods, your decisions. But they're not separate. The environment you maintain is the container for your mind. And if that container is filled with noise, mess, distraction, and stimulation, it becomes nearly impossible to access a tranquil thought. The world outside becomes the blueprint for what transpires inside. Look around, not casually. Really look. Are there papers everywhere? Tabs open you haven't touched in days? Half-written ideas scattered across apps and notebooks? That isn't just disorganization, that's mental friction. Each item is a tug, each notification is a leak. Each reminder of an unfinished task pulls a sliver of your energy without asking consent. And over time, this accumulates. You don't even realize how much you're spending just trying to mentally shove away the clutter. That's why so many feel drained before they even begin. It's not that they're lazy, it's that their space is engineered to exhaust them. And then, in the midst of all that, they attempt to make vital decisions. They try to think lucidly about their future, their relationships, their purpose. But the brain doesn't perform optimally in chaos. You wouldn't plan a battle strategy in a nightclub. You wouldn't write your will during an earthquake. Yet people endeavor to build their lives quietly, deliberately, while encircled by digital storms, crowded rooms, and scattered minds. It doesn't work. Not because they're incapable of clarity, but because clarity cannot breathe in that environment. A Stoic safeguards their state. That doesn't mean you require absolute silence, a minimalist home, or a mountain retreat. It means you take responsibility for the atmosphere that envelops your thoughts. You choose to guard it the same way you'd guard your time or your energy. You start to notice what you allow into your field, what lights are constantly flickering around you, what conversations you're listening to even when you're not speaking, what energy resides in your space without your permission. Clarity doesn't need perfection, but it needs intention. When your environment is clean, not just in appearance, but in energy, your thoughts cease rushing. You begin to feel the distinction between what matters and what's merely urgent. The line becomes clearer between what you're being pulled into and what you are consciously selecting. A kind of presence returns, a stillness, not the empty or numb variety, but the stillness that springs from alignment, the sensation of being in a space that supports your highest self, not battles against it. Carl Jung once noted, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." But here's the reality most miss. You cannot look inside properly when the outside is tugging at your sleeves. The inner world requires peace to open, and peace demands preparation, not in grand gestures, but in small, deliberate acts. Making your bed in the morning isn't just a chore, it's a signal. Closing unused tabs isn't just tidiness, it's clarity made visible. Turning your phone face down isn't just manners, it's self-respect. These minor actions aren't about being neat. They're about removing obstacles between you and your deepest cognitions. Most underestimate how profoundly space affects psyche. They believe mental discipline alone will carry them, but the body is a gateway. When the eyes see clutter, the brain prepares for stress. When the ears hear constant pings and movement, the nervous system reacts as if under siege. You commence the day already agitated, not from a crisis, but because your system is overloaded with meaningless signals. The brain can only track so much, and if it's tracking noise, it can't track depth. That's why clarity often materializes after you've cleaned a room, taken a walk, or powered everything down. It's not magic, it's space. It's granting your thoughts room to echo and your intuition's room to ascend. We're not built for perpetual stimulation. We're not built to make sense of our lives between dings and pop-ups and fragments of other people's thoughts. Clarity isn't discovered in more. It's discovered in less. Less distraction, less clutter, less noise, so that what remains can be felt completely. It's also about boundaries, not just physical ones, but energetic ones. Who are you permitting into your space? What kinds of conversations are occurring around you? What do you tolerate in the name of politeness that leaves you scattered afterward? Your environment isn't just objects, it's people, voices, patterns. And the more you allow what drains you to linger near, the harder it becomes to hear yourself. You're not weak for needing boundaries. You're wise for recognizing what dims your inner lucidity. A clean environment is an act of self-honesty. It reflects that you're prepared to stop letting life happen to you, that you're willing to create the conditions where your finest self can appear. And it doesn't need to be dramatic. Start small, clean one corner, turn off one notification, cancel one unnecessary obligation. These tiny shifts are potent. They generate momentum. They dispatch a message to your subconscious. I'm serious about this. And your mind will respond. It will begin to settle, to sharpen, to listen. The Stoics believed the mind should not be ruled by circumstance, but they also understood we must train the mind to withstand temptation, to resist indulgence, to return to the essential. That discipline begins where your body is, not later, not when everything's perfect, but right now in the space you inhabit. Make it sacred, not through ritual, but through respect. Respect for your mind, respect for your peace, respect for your clarity, because clarity isn't something you stumble upon. It's something you prepare for. It enters the room when there's space for it to sit down. And if you don't create that space, it won't shout, it won't fight the clutter, it will simply depart quietly. So choose now, make room, let your space mirror your intentions. Let your environment become a silent ally in your search for deeper thought. That's where clarity begins, not in your thoughts, but in the place where those thoughts are permitted to unfold. Most people don't know what they're optimizing for. They believe they do. They utter words like peace, freedom, love, meaning. But if you observe their actions, something doesn't reconcile. They claim they desire peace, but they never set down the chaos. They remain in relationships that drain them, jobs that agitate them, routines that offer no room to breathe. They claim they want freedom, yet keep chasing the kind of approval that makes them a prisoner to everyone else's opinion. They claim they want to feel whole, but they construct their lives around fragments, status, followers, attention, noise. They don't perceive it, but their decisions have already answered the question they never took time to ask. What am I truly optimizing for? Because whether you're conscious of it or not, you're always optimizing for something. Every choice you make is a vote toward what matters most to you, not what you say matters, what actually governs your choices. That's what makes this realization uncomfortable, because your outcomes don't contradict your values, they expose them. You believe you're unlucky, distracted, stuck, but most often you're just aligned with a priority you didn't intend to empower. Maybe it's comfort, maybe it's recognition, maybe it's the illusion of control. You keep cycling through identical situations, not because you're cursed, but because you're subconsciously loyal to a version of yourself built to survive, not thrive. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." That's what occurs when you don't define your aim. Life starts aiming for you. And usually it aims low. It aims for quick highs, easy wins, safe roads, familiar traps. Not because you're incapable of more, but because the systems around you reward indecision. They give you distractions so you never feel the need to sit with your own direction. You're nudged, guided, flooded with options, but never told to clarify the compass that should be steering it all. So you get pulled instead of choosing. You end up pursuing opportunities that sound good but feel wrong. You achieve things that impress people you don't even respect. You build momentum in a direction that makes you feel more lost, not less. This is the juncture where most collapse, not because they're weak, but because clarity demands honesty, and honesty can feel brutal when you've built a life around bypassing it. When you claim you want peace but keep selecting environments that reward emotional chaos, something must yield. When you claim you want love but keep choosing the kind of validation that feels more like performance than connection, you eventually exhaust your excuses. That tension isn't failure, it's feedback. It's your deeper self reminding you that the map you're following isn't aligned with the destination you desire. Clarity doesn't demand that you get everything perfect. It demands that you get specific. What do you actually want your life to advance toward? Not just in moments of reflection, but in daily action. Is it freedom? Then why are your habits wrapped in dependency? Is it strength? Then why are your boundaries built to please? Is it truth? Then why do you silence yourself to preserve peace? These aren't accusations, they're invitations. An authentic life begins when you stop pretending the surface and the core are identical. It's insufficient to merely want something. You must protect it. You must name it clearly and let it guide the difficult choices. That's what it means to define what you're optimizing for, not in theory, but in practice. You examine the trade-offs you're willing to make. You accept that you cannot serve everything at once. You cannot prioritize comfort and growth simultaneously. You cannot chase acceptance and authenticity without feeling torn. You must choose, and that choice will cost you, but it's the cost that renders it potent. When your aim becomes singular, your mind starts to cleanse itself. The unnecessary begins to slough away. You stop negotiating with every new opinion. You stop trying to excel at everything. You stop saying yes merely to be liked. You become more intentional, less apologetic. You start designing your life around the internal signal, not the external noise. And with that, the quality of your decision-making transforms. You don't just ask, "What do I feel like doing?" You ask, "Does this advance me toward what I truly wish to embody?" That query shatters patterns. It prevents you from betraying yourself for short-term relief. It grounds you when distractions begin to sparkle. It clarifies your values when everything around you blurs them. And clarity, once it takes root, renders your life simpler. Not easier, but simpler. You'll still encounter hard days, difficult people, setbacks, but you'll stop getting lost in them, because even when the path is unclear, the direction isn't. You know what you're walking toward, and that knowledge alters your posture. It grants you something the world cannot confiscate: internal coherence. The Stoics believed in living according to nature, which meant living in alignment with your own rational, examined self. They didn't chase every impulse. They didn't optimize for fleeting highs. They optimized for virtue, for inner fortitude, for a life of integrity. That doesn't mean they were flawless. It means they chose to live by a compass they had tested. They knew what they were aiming for, so even in uncertainty, their movement was grounded. You require that same clarity, especially now when the world sells you 1,000 goals that look like success but feel like emptiness. Defining your aim is how you cut through that. It's how you resist being pulled into lives that don't belong to you. It's how you make peace with the fact that some things will have to be relinquished, not because they're wrong, but because they're not aligned. And alignment is more valuable than abundance. It's not about possessing everything. It's about moving with focus, depth, and honesty every day in every choice. So pause and ask yourself, not abstractly but practically, what are you truly optimizing for? When you speak, when you choose, when you commit, What sits beneath that? If it's unclear, don't panic, just listen. Clarity doesn't shout, it waits. It emerges slowly as you peel away the noise, but once it arrives, you'll feel it. You'll recognize the quiet conviction it brings. You'll cease trying to be everything and start becoming something. Not all at once, but steadily, in a manner that endures. There's a quiet peril in indecision. It doesn't resemble fear, it resembles flexibility. It wears the mask of patience, of wisdom, of being open. You've heard it before. Stay open. Keep your options alive. Don't rush into anything. And yes, in certain moments, that can be sound counsel. But repeated often enough, applied too broadly, it becomes a strategy for avoidance. Not choosing feels safe because it postpones the discomfort of regret. But here's the truth. Indecision isn't wisdom. It's fear with a softer voice. You tell yourself you're taking your time, but really, you're hoping life will decide for you. That some perfect sign will emerge. That something outside you will make the uncomfortable choice you're afraid to make inside. But life doesn't operate that way. It rewards movement, not hesitation, direction, not drifting. The person who hesitates too long begins to confuse stillness with safety. But drifting isn't peace, it's erosion. Bit by bit, your confidence wears away. You second-guess even the minor things. And over time, you become someone who waits for clarity, for confirmation, for certainty, and forgets what it means to act from the core. Clarity doesn't emanate from floating, it emanates from choosing, from making a decision and meeting what follows with courage. A decisive mistake will instruct you more than endless speculation ever could. But we evade that mistake, don't we? Because being wrong feels like failure. It wounds the ego. It makes you question your judgment. And yet, indecision carries a cost of its own, a quieter, longer-lasting variety. The kind where days pass and nothing changes. The kind where years elapse and you're still wondering, still weighing, still waiting. That's not caution. That's avoidance wrapped in the language of reason. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "A wrongdoer is often the man who has left something undone, not always he who has done something." That's a potent reversal. We're so terrified of doing the wrong thing, but we rarely dread the weight of what we didn't do, the words we didn't utter, the moves we never made, the ideas we let perish before they were born. And what's worse, those losses don't scream. They don't rupture like poor decisions do. They fade quietly into the backdrop, and suddenly your life isn't constructed on choices. It's constructed on omissions, things that never transpired because you told yourself it wasn't the right time. And we justify it with such noble phrases. I'm being wise. I'm just not sure yet. But dig deeper and you'll usually uncover fear. Fear of being judged. Fear of closing a door. Fear of failure, of course, but also fear of identity shift. Because the moment you choose, you define yourself. You leave something behind. And that finality frightens us. So we delay. We say yes and no simultaneously. We dwell in the middle, half-hearted, half-present, half-alive. But you don't grow there. You grow at the edge, where decisions demand you to be seen, where you commit to something even knowing it might not work, because that's where your clarity sharpens, not before the choice, but after it. Movement brings contrast. It shows you the terrain. You step forward and the fog begins to dissipate. And even if it proves to be the incorrect path, at least now you know. You're not speculating anymore. You're learning, you're adapting, you're becoming someone who moves. That movement doesn't need to be loud or bold. It doesn't need to transform your entire life overnight. But it does need to be yours, chosen, owned, clear. Because the more you practice choosing, the stronger your discernment becomes. You stop requiring everyone else's opinions. You stop needing to feel ready. You start trusting that clarity isn't a destination. It's a result of walking with intent. Carl Jung believed indecision often sprang from a split inside the psyche, a conflict between two opposing desires or fears, the part of you that wants to be seen and the part that wants to stay safe, the part that longs for transformation and the part that clings to the comfort of who you've always been. This internal tension isn't a flaw, it's part of being human, but if you don't resolve it through conscious choice, it will quietly govern you from the shadows. You'll keep saying maybe when your soul is screaming for a yes or a no. So don't glorify indecision. Don't mistake delay for depth. Real depth comes from showing up with your full weight, from declaring, "I don't know how this ends, but I choose this anyway," and then permitting whatever follows to shape you. That's how strength is forged, not by knowing the future, but by being willing to meet it on your own terms. And yes, you might commit errors. You might change your mind. That's part of the process. But indecision isn't neutral. It costs energy. It drains focus. It keeps your attention divided. You cannot be present in your current path if your mind is still negotiating another. Decision creates closure, and closure creates peace. Not always comfort, but peace. A kind of internal stillness that says, "This is the way I'm going." And that stillness is where authentic clarity resides. So if you've been floating, return to the ground. Choose, not recklessly, but bravely. Listen to your resistance, but don't let it decide. Hear your fear, but don't let it author the script. Define your values, check your direction, and then move. Because waiting for the perfect moment is the most seductive trap of all. It makes you feel like you're being wise when really you're just being delayed. Let your clarity come from motion. Let your confidence come from action. Let your strength come not from never doubting, but from no longer needing to evade doubt to make a move. That's how decisive individuals are built, not from being certain, but from being willing. And the more willing you become, the less power fear has to keep you still. Most people don't realize how often they select what's easy over what's meaningful. Not because they lack depth or vision, but because the world constantly hands them options designed to distract. Paths are presented, offers are made, people show interest. And because something is available, because it's already before them, they assume it must be worth pursuing. But availability doesn't mean alignment. Just because something is within reach doesn't mean it's right for you. Just because someone wants you doesn't mean they're beneficial for your soul. Just because a door opens doesn't mean you were meant to walk through it. We chase what's easy to access, what's immediately gratifying, what saves us from sitting in uncertainty. But in doing so, we lose the capacity to wait, to pause, to discern. We forget how to choose deliberately, and slowly our lives become filled with what was convenient, not what was true. You wind up in relationships that were easy to fall into but hard to grow within. You take jobs that pay enough to keep you busy, but not enough to make you feel alive. You fill your calendar with obligations you never consciously selected, all because they were offered, not because they were aligned. Carl Jung once remarked, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But that privilege is forfeited the moment you start building your identity on what's available rather than what's authentic. When your direction is dictated by what happens to be nearby, you become a passive character in your own story. You adapt to other people's timelines, other people's expectations, other people's definitions of success. And what's worse, you start to believe this is what you wanted. You stop questioning if the life you're living is actually yours. A Stoic doesn't operate this way. A Stoic doesn't make decisions based on convenience. They're not seduced by urgency, flattery, or trends. They choose what is necessary, not what's shiny, not what's praised, but what's aligned with the kind of character they're endeavoring to build. Because they know the things that matter most often arrive slowly. They demand patience, commitment, and clarity. And if your mind is perpetually reacting to what's placed before you, you won't have the presence to see what genuinely belongs to you. This is where self-discipline becomes a form of self-respect. When you no longer say yes just because something's easy. When you no longer pursue something simply because it's possible. Instead, you start filtering life differently. You ask, does this fit the direction I'm choosing? Does this reflect the values I claim to hold? And more often than not, the answer will be no. That's not a failure, that's growth. Growth often resembles not moving, like holding your ground when everything around you is trying to pull you elsewhere. Saying no is one of the most potent skills you can learn, not in a defensive way, but in a grounded one. No to the wrong relationship. No to the tempting shortcut. No to the quick fix that would only distract you from the deeper work. Because every yes is a cost. And if you don't track that cost, you'll expend your time and energy on things that feel full in the moment, but leave you vacant afterward. The point isn't to reject everything, it's to become someone who doesn't confuse availability with destiny. The more aligned you become, the more you'll be misunderstood by those still chasing everything that glitters. That's okay. You're not here to gather what everyone else wants. You're here to build what only you can carry. And sometimes that means slowing down. That means watching opportunities pass without grasping. That means releasing good enough so you're not too satiated to receive what's authentically yours. Clarity thrives in spaces where patience lives. But our world is allergic to stillness. We're told that if we're not chasing something, we're falling behind. That if we're not constantly reaching, we're wasting time. But reaching isn't the same as progressing. You can be busy your entire life and still wind up nowhere meaningful. Movement doesn't always signify momentum. Sometimes the most powerful move is no move at all. Stillness isn't stagnation, it's restraint. It's the refusal to let life drag you by the wrist. It's the decision to let your inner standard, not external supply, decide your direction. And that kind of stillness demands strength. It demands you to sit with discomfort instead of rushing to fix it. To trust that alignment is worth waiting for. To believe the right things will find you when you've created sufficient space for them to land. That's the shift. From grabbing at what's there to choosing what fits. From being pulled by availability to being led by integrity. From reacting to every offer to responding only to what calls something deeper within you. And the more you live this way, the more natural it becomes. You stop seeking so much and start seeing more. You begin to notice that many of the things you chased never truly nourished you, that the things that looked like opportunities were often just distractions in disguise. And eventually, something beautiful occurs. You stop needing life to constantly impress you. You stop needing to be perpetually entertained or validated. You begin to enjoy the quiet. You start to trust your own pace. You learn to wait, not with anxiety, but with calm awareness. Because now you're not waiting for something to fill a void. You're waiting because you know your aim is clear. You're not empty, you're ready. There's a difference. The Stoic way is not about denial. It's about discipline, about choosing not what's in front of you, but what's in line with you. That means releasing what's available so you can make room for what's aligned. And that's not a once-in-a-while decision. It's a daily practice, a habit of saying, just because I can doesn't mean I should. A commitment to yourself that you will not sell your peace for proximity, that you will not trade your path for what happens to appear uninvited. You are not here to chase everything. You are here to choose wisely. And choosing wisely often begins with the courage to do nothing when nothing fits, because that space you protect becomes the foundation of a life you actually wish to live. Not a life made of whatever was nearby, but a life made of what was true. And in that truth, clarity finally begins to take root. Quiet, strong, unshakable. Clarity isn't just about making superior choices. It's about comprehending the landscape in which those choices unfold. It's insufficient to ask, what should I do? Because that question exists in isolation. Real clarity asks, what system am I operating inside? What game is being played here? And more critically, who benefits if I act without thinking? When you're caught in a reactive loop, it always feels personal. Someone insults you and your pride flares. A sudden change catches you off guard, and panic takes the wheel. But step back just far enough and you'll perceive something vital. Reactions are often precisely what someone else is hoping for. This is where power becomes subtle, not through force, but through framing. If someone cannot control your actions directly, the next best thing is to control the context in which you act. They don't need to instruct you what to do. They just need to shape the moment so you make their desired move for them. They need you impulsive. They need you defensive. They need you to take the bait. Because once you do, your clarity dissolves and your power is handed over, not because you weren't intelligent enough, but because the frame had already been set before you entered the scene. Carl Jung once observed that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And that includes projecting their own chaos onto you. Not consciously, perhaps, but energetically. People frame situations to pull you into their mess, their pace, their urgency. If you're not careful, their lack of clarity becomes your responsibility. Their fear becomes your confusion. Their manipulation becomes your mistake. And all of it commenced because you didn't stop to ask, whose frame am I operating inside right now? You witness it everywhere. In arguments, when someone tries to define the terms before you even speak. In business, when you're pressured into a decision before the deal disappears. In relationships, when silence is weaponized and timing is used to shift power. These aren't just dynamics, they're frames. Invisible structures that dictate how you think, feel, and respond, unless you take the pause to recognize them. Because until you recognize the frame, you're not thinking inside your own mind. You're thinking inside someone else's design. But the moment you see the frame, you interrupt the manipulation. You step outside of it, and instead of reacting, you observe. You ask not just, what am I being told, but why am I being told it this way, and what do they gain if I believe it? That's the power of meta-awareness. It grants you space to choose without being pushed. And from that space, you reclaim authorship over your own narrative. This isn't about becoming paranoid or mistrustful. It's about becoming strategic. It's understanding that the loudest voices don't always emanate from truth. They emanate from leverage. People will pressure you to act quickly, to prove something, to defend yourself. But urgency is often a tool, not a truth. It's engineered to rob you of clarity by hijacking your nervous system. That's why one of the clearest moves you can make isn't an action, it's a pause. A moment where you mentally step outside the frame and examine it before you move. Because the reality is, when you rush, you rarely act from alignment. You act from pressure, and pressure is rarely neutral. Someone always benefits from it. The question is it you? And if the answer is no, then it's not a situation demanding action. It's a trap demanding awareness. This single shift in thinking transmutes everything. You no longer ask, what's the right answer? You ask, whose terms am I trying to answer this on? And sometimes the most potent decision you can make is to refuse the question altogether, to change the rules, to reset the frame before you respond. Marcus Aurelius practiced this constantly. In his private writings, he would remind himself that the opinions and judgments of others were merely noise, external shadows that couldn't touch his inner reason unless he allowed them to. That inner fortress, that clear mental ground, is where clarity is constructed, not just by thinking hard, but by thinking differently, by zooming out from the immediate stimulus and remembering the long game. Who do I want to be in this moment, and who benefits if I forget? And sometimes it's not even another person framing you, it's your past, your conditioning, your fear of being misunderstood, rejected, unloved. Those old scripts will whisper at the exact instant you need clarity. They'll say, prove them wrong. Say something now. Don't lose your chance. And if you don't question them, you act them out. Not because they're true, but because they've been rehearsed in your nervous system for years. That's why clarity isn't just an intellectual exercise. It's a practice of mental freedom. It's the ability to interrupt your own autopilot, to challenge the frame not just outside you, but within you, to declare, just because this feels urgent doesn't mean it is. Just because this looks familiar doesn't mean it's right. Just because I'm being told to choose now doesn't mean I need to. This kind of self-command doesn't render you cold, it renders you calm. It doesn't render you indecisive, it renders you deliberate, and over time, it grants you a quiet edge. Because while others are scrambling to respond, to defend, to prove, you're watching the board. You're moving from clarity, not from panic. And in a world addicted to reaction, that kind of poise becomes rare and powerfully effective. The strongest minds aren't just the ones with the best answers. They're the ones who can slow down long enough to question the question itself, who understand that every situation arrives with invisible strings attached, and that sometimes clarity means not cutting the string, but seeing who's holding it. So before you speak, before you act, before you decide, take that extra breath. Ask not just, what do I want, but what's being set up here? Who wins if I rush? What happens if I don't bite the bait? Because that moment of awareness is where your freedom lives. Not in avoiding all conflict, but in refusing to be played. Clarity is the art of seeing beyond the surface, of holding your center when the world tries to shake it. And it's not about winning every situation. It's about not losing yourself in them. That's the real frame worth protecting. The frame of a mind that thinks before it moves, that watches before it speaks, that knows when silence is power and when action is freedom, not because it's smarter, but because it's sovereign. And in that sovereignty, clarity becomes your default, not your exception. Most people hesitate before a significant decision because they're afraid of making the wrong move. They picture the embarrassment, the loss, the chaos that might follow, and so they wait. They stall. They tell themselves, I just need a little more time. But while they're evaluating the risk of action, they almost never calculate the price of inaction. What is the cost of doing nothing? What begins to decay in the silence? What opportunity fades from view while you hesitate? Convincing yourself it's wisdom when it's really fear in disguise. The mind possesses a strange bias. It exaggerates the weight of stepping forward while completely downplaying the toll of standing still. You might expend days, weeks, months analyzing every move you could make, but rarely do we turn that same intensity inward and ask, what happens if I keep avoiding this? What if nothing changes, not just for today, but for years? And if that question doesn't chill you, perhaps it should. Because time doesn't stand still while we hesitate. It keeps moving, and often the greatest damage in life isn't caused by the things we do. It's by the things we let slide, by the silence we justify, by the potential we bury while pretending it'll dig itself out later. This is where the Stoics had it right. They weren't about obsessing over worst-case scenarios just for the sake of anxiety. They practiced something deeper. They called it premeditation malorum, the premeditation of evils. Not to catastrophize, but to prepare, to run simulations in the mind, not of what success looks like, but of what decay looks like if you ignore what must be done. It's not about being pessimistic, it's about being honest. To look clearly at the truth of what happens if you let fear set the pace of your life. If you let indecision rot away, the structure of who you're becoming. Seneca once wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. He wasn't speaking of partying or distractions. He was pointing to something more dangerous, wasting time through mental passivity, through waiting for life to sort itself out. But life doesn't hand you clarity like a gift. It reveals itself only through forward motion. And the longer you sit in pause, the more your confidence corrodes, not because you are incapable, but because clarity is tied to momentum. Every day you avoid the decision, it becomes heavier, not lighter. We imagine that avoiding the hard conversation will preserve peace, that ignoring the gut feeling will somehow purchase more time. But peace bought through avoidance is rented, not owned. And sooner or later, the payment comes due, often in the form of regret. Not the loud, dramatic variety, but the quiet, daily erosion of knowing you didn't move when you should have, that you let something important slide just a little too long, and now it's out of reach. Carl Jung said, "What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size. That avoidance has a cost. It doesn't freeze the problem in place, it feeds it. Silence becomes the soil in which your doubts grow roots. Hesitation becomes the invitation for lesser priorities to take over. And while your higher self waits at the threshold, life moves on without it, not as a punishment, but as a consequence. You don't need to become someone who always rushes. That's not the point. The point is learning to simulate not just the danger of movement, but the danger of staying still. To ask yourself honestly, what decays when I delay? What do I give permission to grow simply by not addressing it? And what kind of person am I becoming by doing nothing at all? Sometimes clarity doesn't feel like a breakthrough. It feels like a reckoning, like realizing that your avoidance wasn't neutral. It was shaping your life in the background, and the weight you thought you were avoiding was just shifting to another part of your soul, one that eventually starts to whisper in moments of stillness, "You know what you should have done." But here's the thing. Once you see that clearly, you gain power, because now you can begin to choose your discomfort wisely. The discomfort of the hard conversation or the discomfort of silence. The discomfort of the risk or the discomfort of watching time erase your potential. There is no path without weight. There is only the question of which weight you want to carry, and which will break you over time if you pretend it isn't there. The sharpest minds don't just think about what could go right. They also calculate the corrosion of avoidance. They imagine what kind of self they become if they keep delaying, keep suppressing, keep hoping clarity will arrive before they act. But clarity, in its authentic form, is often the result of action, not the prerequisite. It comes not when you know everything, but when you've moved through the fog long enough to understand what matters. So don't ask only, "What will happen if I do this?" Also ask, "What will happen if I don't?" Let that second question resonate loudly in your decisions. Let it remind you that stillness can be a weapon when chosen, but a prison when defaulted to. Let it remind you that silence can be sacred, but also suffocating when it becomes the shield behind which you hide your truth. You're not here to avoid all pain. You're here to pick the pain that leads to growth, to pick the discomfort that sharpens you, and to remember that while most people live as if they have endless time, clarity begins the moment you understand how little of it you truly control. That's the gift of premeditation, Malorum. Not fear, but foresight. Not anxiety, but strength. Not waiting for regret to teach you, but preparing your mind so regret has no room to grow. So the next time you're hesitating, take a moment. Picture who you become if you do nothing. Picture the conversation that never occurs, the decision that never gets made, the dream that never breathes. And then ask yourself not just what you're afraid of doing, but what you're afraid of not becoming. Because in the end, clarity isn't just about what you see, it's about what you're willing to face. And sometimes the clearest thing you can do is stop waiting for the moment to be perfect and start moving before the cost of stillness becomes permanent. We mature, collecting ideas like seashells, small enough to pocket, smooth enough to accept, without scrutiny. You're instructed to be kind, so you nod and absorb it. You're told forgiveness is a virtue, so you wear it like armor. You're informed that putting yourself first is wrong, even shameful. And eventually, those beliefs become background noise. So constant, so familiar, you forget to inquire where they originated. But clarity isn't just about what you think. It's about why you think it. So much of what we label our values aren't authentically ours. They're borrowed, inherited, rewarded into us. You behave a certain way and someone applauds. You question something and someone frowns. And slowly, silently, you adapt. Not to truth, but to approval. What you end up with isn't conviction, it's conditioning. Not a compass, but a leash. That's where the real distortion commences. Because now, every decision you make, every boundary you draw or fail to set, gets filtered through a belief you never interrogated. Be kind, they say, but kind to whom and at what cost? Always forgive. But does that include those who never acknowledged what they did? Don't be selfish, but what if the only way to grow is to finally place yourself first? The world adores shaping you with these ideas, not because they serve you, but because they make you simpler to manage. This is why the Stoics didn't just focus on action, they focused on inner auditing. They believed in stripping away every idea that wasn't anchored in reason. Epictetus said, "Don't just say you have read books. Show that through them you have learned to think differently." In other words, don't just inherit beliefs. Dissect them, challenge them, interrogate their origin like you're the only one responsible for your mind. Because you are. Carl Jung took this even further. He cautioned that most of our so-called morality isn't chosen, it's absorbed from the collective, from parents, teachers, leaders, even advertisements. And once it's inside you, it speaks in your own voice. That's what makes it so hazardous. The idea that doesn't serve you still feels like your own thought, but it isn't. It's a parasite dressed as wisdom, and unless you slow down and ask, where did this belief originate? Who does it serve? You'll keep living your life as a reaction to someone else's design. Sometimes the most potent question you can ask is simply, who benefits from me believing this? Who benefits if I never speak up? Who benefits if I constantly suppress my needs? Who benefits if I spend my life over-apologizing for existing? Often the answer isn't noble, it's strategic. Someone, somewhere profits from your confusion, from your guilt, from your silence. And the longer you let that voice go unchallenged, the deeper it roots itself in your choices. Clarity begins when you realize that even noble-sounding beliefs can be employed as tools of control. Be humble can be twisted into stay small. Forgive can become tolerate abuse. Love unconditionally can mutate into accept mistreatment. The words remain the same, but their function shifts, depending on the hands that wield them. This is why your inner audit must be ruthless, not cynical but precise, not hateful but discerning. You're not rebelling by questioning the ideas you were given. You're returning to yourself. You're declaring, I will no longer carry beliefs that ask me to betray my own sanity. I will not call it virtue to abandon myself. I will not call it morality to tolerate the intolerable. And I will not call it kindness if it robs me of clarity. That's the shift. You stop being the echo of your environment and start becoming the architect of your mind. You choose your values the way a craftsman chooses tools, not because they were handed down, but because they are sharp, honest, and necessary. And when you do that, everything transforms. Suddenly, you're no longer exhausted by trying to live up to ideas that never fit you. You're no longer pulled in 10 directions by guilt that was never yours to carry. You start to speak clearer, stand taller, Say no without shame. Because now your life isn't built on borrowed slogans. It's rooted in examined truth. You still choose to be kind, but not when it costs your voice. You still forgive, but not when it means denying your pain. You still care, but it's not performative. It's not because someone once told you that your worth depended on how small you could make yourself. This is what it means to take authorship of your beliefs. Not to reject everything, but to re-choose it with your eyes open, with your strength intact, with your clarity unshaken. So the next time you feel that inner pressure, that soft, familiar guilt trying to steer your decisions, pause. Ask, is this mine? Did I choose this belief with clarity, or did I inherit it because it made someone else more comfortable? You owe it to yourself to live by a mind that is truly yours, because the alternative is to spend your life walking paths you didn't choose, defending values you didn't examine, and sacrificing peace for approval that never lasts. Clarity doesn't always arrive like a light. Sometimes it shows up as a question that burns through the fog. And when it does, don't run from it. Sit with it. Let it pull apart the old stories, let it untangle the voices, and let it make room for something real, something you chose with full awareness. Because in the end, nothing is more dangerous than a belief you didn't know was planted, and nothing is more powerful than a mind that questions everything until only the truth remains. We inhabit a world where thinking is often mistaken for doing. People sit in cafes with journals brimming with goals, mind maps, reflections, color-coded life plans. They listen to 5 podcasts weekly about productivity and self-mastery. They reflect endlessly, analyze every emotion, dissect every interaction into 1,000 angles, attempting to solve life like a mathematical equation. And yet, despite all this mental gymnastics, nothing changes. They still hesitate, still doubt, still feel stuck. Why? Because clarity without action is just another brand of delusion. The overthinker wears clarity like a costume. They believe that understanding the path is identical to walking it. But clarity in thought is only the commencement. True transformation demands clarity in motion. And that's an entirely different beast. Thinking occurs in comfort. Action demands discomfort. It asks you to be exposed, to risk failure, to confront resistance, not just in the world, but within yourself. You can convince yourself you're progressing just because your thoughts sound more sophisticated, but until your feet move, your life doesn't. That's where so many become trapped, in the illusion that more reflection leads to more clarity. But there arrives a point where your reflections become rehearsals for avoidance. You keep dissecting the identical idea, revisiting the same hesitation, looping around the same decision, and each loop renders the fear a little stronger and the will a little weaker. You don't require another mental model, you require movement. Carl Jung once stated, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." There's a silent yet profound chasm between the self you imagine and the self you live as. And the longer that chasm exists, the more anxious, resentful, and fragmented you feel. Clarity of mind must be tested by the reality of experience. Otherwise, it remains theory, polished, pretty, and powerless. What halts most people isn't confusion. It's fear wearing the mask of analysis. It's perfectionism disguised as preparation. You tell yourself you're not ready because you want to be sure. You want to evade mistakes. But clarity doesn't guarantee correctness. It's not about predicting the flawless outcome. It's about aligning with your values, your priorities, your direction, and then moving forward in integrity with those. There's a peculiar freedom that emerges when you stop needing every decision to be impeccable. When you release the illusion that mistakes will ruin you. In truth, it's stagnation that erodes you, not movement. You can course correct once you're in motion, but you can't correct a path you never started. The only real mistake is letting the desire for certainty keep you frozen in thought. Sometimes the most potent act of clarity is a step into the unknown, a step that might be wrong, might be awkward, might even fail. But it breaks the pattern. It shifts you from passive observer to active participant in your own life. You stop being a critic of your possibilities and start being a builder of them. That's where confidence originates, not from knowing everything, but from knowing you'll respond, adjust, and grow, regardless of the outcome. Even the Stoics knew this. They weren't passive philosophers. They were doers, warriors, statesmen. Marcus Aurelius wrote not to theorize, but to remind himself to act, to endure, to be just. The mind wasn't a place to hide. It was a place to prepare. But the battlefield of life was always out there, in reality, not in rumination. There's an honesty that surfaces when you take action. You stop speculating about who you are and start proving it. You stop guessing what matters and start discovering it. Every decision you make sharpens your clarity. Every misstep teaches you something your thoughts never could. And slowly, through experience, you build a self that's not just aware, but embodied. This is the trap. The belief that a little more thought will finally render you fearless. It won't. The only thing that makes fear lose its power is motion. Clarity that leads nowhere is just another method to stay safe, to stay comfortable, to stay small. But your life wasn't meant to be lived in the waiting room of your own mind. You'll never think your way into a different reality. You have to move, utter the words, set the boundary, apply for the position, end the cycle, start the project, tell the truth, show up even when your hands tremble. And if it goes wrong, so what? You learned, you grew, you now stand one level higher in your understanding, not because you thought more, but because you acted anyway. Thinking clearly is powerful, but acting clearly is transformative. It takes courage to translate what you know into what you do, to align your inner world with your outer behavior, to risk imperfection for the sake of integrity. That's where real clarity resides, not in pristine thoughts, but in purposeful action. So if you've been thinking for days, weeks, perhaps even years about a change you know you need to make, consider this. The clearest thought in the world is worthless if it never leaves your head. Don't let your wisdom decay in the dark. Bring it to life, even if it trembles, even if it stumbles, even if you're not certain it's perfect. Because the reality is, clarity deepens after you move. The fog clears when you walk through it, not when you wait for it to vanish. A thinker can explain the path, but only a doer can walk it, and only a walker becomes free. In the end, clarity is not just about how well you think, it's about how deeply you live. So stop waiting, start becoming, and let your actions speak the truth your mind already knows. Pain has a method of appearing precisely when we believe we've deciphered things. It interrupts, it humiliates, it strips us of our sense of command. And in that raw unease, most individuals reach for distraction, denial, or numbing. They treat pain like a glitch, something to flee as rapidly as possible. But clarity, authentic clarity, doesn't come from evading pain. It comes from integrating it, from gazing it dead in the eye and inquiring, "What are you attempting to teach me?" Most people survive their pain without ever studying it. They undergo heartbreak, failure, rejection, but they don't digest those experiences. They don't extract the truth embedded within them. They move on swiftly, hoping the next chapter won't sting as severely. But a wound unexamined is a lesson repeated. Carl Jung once remarked, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Pain that isn't understood doesn't vanish, it just conceals itself. It seeps into your decisions. It echoes in your relationships. It shapes your future without your awareness. There's a quiet potency in turning toward what hurt you, not to relive it, not to wallow in it, but to study it like data, like feedback from life itself. When someone rejects you, it might sting, but underneath that sting is a signal. Maybe it points to a pattern you haven't noticed. Maybe it reveals a deeper wound that's been driving your behavior. Maybe it simply reminds you that your worth was never supposed to be outsourced in the first place. Either way, rejection becomes information, not identity. The same applies to failure. Most individuals avoid it at any cost. But failure, when studied without ego, is one of the greatest clarifiers. It strips away illusions. It shows you what doesn't function. It compels you to confront assumptions you never thought to question. And that's why the Stoics didn't flee from suffering. They used it. They converted it into fuel. They perceived mistakes not as evidence of inadequacy, but as a necessary component of refinement. The modern world instructs us to curate our image, to always appear as if we're winning. But clarity doesn't come from performance. It comes from reflection. It's not about how flawless you look. It's about how honest you are about what's fractured. And here's the twist. The more you face your pain directly, the less power it holds over you. What once triggered shame becomes a symbol of strength. What once brought silence now speaks wisdom. You don't need to broadcast your pain. You just need to stop hiding it from yourself. Integrating pain doesn't mean romanticizing it. It means using it. It means recognizing that your past wounds don't disqualify you from growth. They're part of the reason you're able to grow at all. A scar is not a weakness. It's evidence of healing. Evidence that you survived. But surviving isn't enough. You must comprehend what you survived and why. This is where emotional maturity begins, not in pretending you've never been hurt, but in no longer being owned by the hurt. You can acknowledge betrayal without becoming bitter. You can feel disappointment without surrendering. You can carry your pain without infecting others with it. That strength, not the absence of emotion, but the integration of it, is what the Stoics revered. Seneca once said, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body," and he meant it. When you stop perceiving pain as a detour and start seeing it as part of the path, everything changes. You stop being terrified of discomfort. You stop flinching every time life challenges your illusions. And instead, you start listening, watching, learning. Pain will always knock on the door. You cannot live a full life without it, but you get to decide what role it plays. Will it control your choices from the shadows, or will it become something sacred, something you've earned the right to carry with grace? Clarity deepens every time you extract a principle from your past. When you ask, what did that experience reveal about me? Not just what happened, but how you reacted, what it triggered, what it exposed. The past is a mirror, not a cage, but only if you dare to gaze into it without flinching. And when you do, when you stop trying to erase your wounds and instead build with them, something formidable occurs. You become less reactive, less desperate for validation, less afraid of endings, because you've already encountered pain and you've learned how to speak its language. You've turned it from an intruder into a teacher, and in doing so, you become something solid, someone who bends but doesn't shatter. There's a kind of quiet dignity in someone who's faced pain and stayed soft, someone who's been disappointed but hasn't closed off, someone who carries memories that still sting but doesn't let them poison the present. That's the work, not pretending pain doesn't exist, but ensuring it's integrated into who you are, not buried underneath who you're trying to be. This isn't easy. It demands time. It demands silence. It demands honesty, the kind that makes your chest tighten, but it's worth it. Because when you perform the inner excavation, when you pull those old wounds into the light, you finally stop being controlled by them. You don't need to keep proving you're strong. You just are. So the next time life knocks you off balance, pause. Don't just attempt to survive the moment, study it. Ask what it's revealing about your expectations, your identity, your attachments. use it. Because that's what a Stoic does. They don't avoid the fire, they walk through it, and come out clearer, quieter, and far more dangerous in their calm. In the end, the strongest people aren't the ones who've avoided pain. They're the ones who've made peace with it, who've stitched it into their philosophy, who've let it deepen their understanding rather than narrow their heart. And that's the kind of clarity that cannot be confiscated, because it wasn't constructed in comfort. It was forged in the places most people run from. Most people react to life as if it's occurring in fast forward. They proceed from one event to the next, one decision to the next, barely pausing to examine the context or the consequences. Everything becomes immediate, everything is urgent, but clarity doesn't dwell in urgency. It dwells in depth. It dwells in the ability to pause, inhale, and ask not just what's happening right now, but what's beneath it, behind it, and beyond it. Clear thinking isn't about perceiving more. It's about perceiving through. When something occurs, an insult, a failure, an opportunity, most individuals halt at the surface. They react to the moment as if the moment is all that exists. But beneath that moment are layers. There's the emotional layer, how it feels. There's the social layer, how others might interpret it. There's the strategic layer, what it signifies tomorrow, next week, next year. And then there's the moral layer, how it aligns or conflicts with your values. Thinking with layered vision is the discipline of noticing all of it before you act. Carl Jung once observed, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." That's layered vision. It's perceiving a rude comment not just as disrespect, but as a reflection of someone else's struggle, or a mirror for your own sensitivity. It's not overthinking, it's depth thinking. It's the refusal to let the obvious blind you to the subtle. Most people only ever witness the obvious. We scroll through headlines and form opinions. We hear someone's tone and presume intent. We receive a message and instantly leap to conclusion. But the world is rarely that straightforward. The clearest thinkers are rarely the loudest or the swiftest. They're the ones who've trained themselves to sit with complexity, to digest before deciding, to resist the craving for quick certainty. They're the ones who ask, what am I not seeing here? Slowing down is an act of rebellion in a world addicted to speed. And yet, slowing down is the sole method to genuinely see. To think clearly, you must zoom out. You must ask how this moment fits into the larger pattern. You must recognize that every decision you make echoes. That silence today might protect your peace next week. That walking away now might create space for something more aligned later. That restraint in the moment might earn you deeper respect in the long run. People often mistake quickness for intelligence. But depth is what changes the game. Depth is what permits you to say, I understand this situation, not just react to it. It grants you foresight. It grants you options. It grants you a power that isn't loud or flashy, but stable. And that kind of power cannot be taken easily because it wasn't constructed on impulse. Layered vision means training your mind to perceive consequences before they arrive. It means thinking not just about what someone did, but why they did it. Not just what the opportunity appears like now, but what it might become under pressure. Not just what you feel, but what created the feeling. And then asking if the reaction you're about to offer is in alignment with the person you're becoming. This kind of thinking demands practice. At first, it can feel unnatural. It can feel like overanalyzing, but over time, it becomes second nature. You start posing different questions. You stop being pulled into emotional snares. You notice patterns in people and situations faster. You learn to anticipate, to sense, to interpret. And most critically, you learn to hold space between stimulus and response. That's where clarity lives, in the pause. When you think with layered vision, your actions become intentional. You stop falling into old loops. You don't just do what feels pleasant, you do what's right. You don't just say what's easiest, you say what's necessary. You don't just pursue what's available, you pursue what's aligned. And suddenly, life starts to feel less chaotic, not because it's easier, but because you're no longer governed by what's immediate. Imagine someone insults you publicly. A surface thinker reacts instantly, anger, defense, retaliation. But a layered thinker slows down. They perceive the insecurity within the insult. They see the people observing. They recognize the long-term cost of reacting emotionally. They see that silence here might earn them more respect than any clever retort ever could. And so they choose differently, not because they're passive, but because they're aware of the deeper game. This isn't about being robotic. It's not about removing emotion from your decisions. It's about letting your emotions inform your actions, not control them. Emotions are valuable, but they're first drafts. Layered thinkers edit before they publish. They don't ignore their reactions. They examine them. They ask, where is this originating? What else is true here? What's the wisest move? Not just the most satisfying one. Thinking with depth doesn't mean you'll always make the flawless choice, but it means your choices will be rooted, considered, and authentic. And that consistency is rare in a world driven by reaction. The person who moves with calm clarity becomes magnetic, trusted, respected, not because they speak the most, but because when they do speak, they've already listened. When they act, they've already thought. Layered vision is about becoming harder to manipulate. When you perceive through the surface, bait doesn't function. You don't rise to every provocation. You don't chase every opportunity. You don't panic when plans shift. You adjust. You recalibrate. You keep your vision intact. That's clarity, not the absence of challenge, but the refusal to be distorted by it. In the end, thinking clearly isn't about knowing all the answers. It's about knowing how to think, when to pause, what to question, and what to trust. And trust should be earned, especially when it comes to your own impulses. Don't just trust your first thought, interrogate it. Don't just accept what's obvious, question it. Don't just react, reflect. This world will keep pulling you towards speed, noise, urgency. It will tempt you to respond quickly, decide hastily, move without thinking. But you can resist, you can pause, you can see. And in that seeing, you reclaim something rare, your depth. Your ability to move through life with vision, not just motion. And that clarity changes everything. Most people traverse life with minds wide open, not in the enlightened sense, but in the vulnerable, unguarded manner. Every voice is permitted entry. Every comment receives a reaction. Every opinion becomes a weight on the scale. And before they even recognize it, they're no longer thinking for themselves. Their mind has transformed into public property, an open corridor for every passing belief, fear, and trend. But clarity, the kind that anchors you, steadies you, doesn't come from exposure, it comes from ownership. To own your mind is not to shut it off. It's not to block everything out and hide in isolation. It's to be discerning, selective, intentional. It means declaring, this mind is mine, not for sale, not up for auction to the loudest influencer, the angriest comment, or the fastest trend. And that kind of clarity, that's not passive. It's earned, it's enforced, it's lived. Because the world will attempt, every single day, to lease space in your head. And it's your duty to decide what gains entry and what never should have been allowed to begin with. You can feel when your mind doesn't belong to you. You become restless, reactive, easily swayed. Your opinions shift with the algorithm. Your self-worth gets tied to feedback loops. Your direction bends to whoever shouts the most convincing story. Suddenly, you're not living. You're being lived. You're not thinking. You're being thought through. And that erosion of self doesn't arrive with fireworks. It's quiet, subtle. It feels like compromise, like going along, like being open-minded, until one day you can't even hear your own voice through the noise. Clarity isn't just a mental state. It's a line in the sand, a boundary, a sacred refusal. It says, no one gets to tell me who I am unless I agree. That doesn't mean you don't listen. It doesn't mean you ignore wisdom, but it means you don't absorb everything blindly. You don't let someone's urgency become your timeline. You don't let their judgment become your truth. You listen like a gatekeeper. You observe like a strategist. You decide with your own hands on the wheel. Carl Jung once wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And he was correct, because full ownership means taking responsibility for what your mind becomes. No more blaming others for confusion. No more pointing fingers at the culture, the critics, or the noise. When your mind is yours, so is your clarity. And that's a weight most people avoid. It's easier to follow, easier to outsource. But clarity isn't ease, it's strength. And strength has a cost. A mind that isn't owned is always chasing approval, status, distraction. It's always running, never arriving. But when your mind belongs to you, something shifts. You stop flinching, you stop over-explaining, you stop rushing to justify every move. You move cleanly, deliberately, and in that steadiness, the world doesn't pull you off course. It watches you find your own. That kind of movement doesn't just influence people, it inspires them. Because most have forgotten what it looks like to move from the inside out. You don't need everyone to comprehend you. You don't need the world to applaud. You just need to be clear. Clear about your direction. Clear about your values. Clear about which thoughts belong in your inner sanctuary and which ones never make it past the gate. This isn't stubbornness, it's sovereignty. And in a world that profits from confusion, mental sovereignty is rebellion. It's declaring, I will not be another echo. I will not be another puppet for agendas I don't even understand. I will live by design, not default. And when you begin to live like this, distractions lose their grip. Manipulators lose their leverage. Approval stops tasting like oxygen. You're no longer performing, you're present. You're no longer guessing, you're grounded. Even in chaos, you can return to center because you've built one. Even in doubt, you can trust yourself because you've earned it. Not through perfection, but through the quiet practice of returning to your truth again and again, no matter how loud the world becomes. Owning your mind also means learning to sit with silence. Not the silence of disinterest, but the silence of strength. The ability to pause without panicking, to observe without reacting, to think without instantly announcing. That stillness is where clarity sharpens, where identity roots, where conviction forms. You don't owe the world your thoughts every time it demands them. Sometimes the clearest mind is the quietest in the room. When you guard your mental space, you stop treating every opinion like an emergency. Not every criticism requires a defense. Not every invitation warrants a yes. Not every challenge is yours to fight. Owning your mind is knowing when to engage and when to walk away, when to speak and when to stay silent, when to wait and when to move with force. And that discernment, that's where clarity breathes. Not in reacting to everything, but in responding to what matters. You'll still commit errors, you'll still be wrong sometimes, but at least it will be your mistake, your lesson, your growth. There is a dignity in that, a profound peace in knowing that even when things don't work out, you didn't betray yourself in the process. You didn't sell your attention to the highest bidder. You didn't move from fear, impulse, or manipulation. You moved because you were clear. And if that clarity leads to pain, it also leads to freedom, and eventually to wisdom. The clearest thinkers aren't the ones with the most information. They're the ones with the strongest filters, the ones who've stopped letting everyone else narrate their life, the ones who've realized that confusion isn't just a lack of answers, it's an overload of noise. And once they cut through the noise, what's left isn't just silence, it's power, clean, quiet, unshakable power, the kind that moves differently, the kind that doesn't ask for permission. So start drawing the line. Start listening for your voice underneath the world's expectations. Start asking, is this thought mine? Is this fear borrowed? Is this goal even real? You'll be astonished how many of your beliefs were never yours to begin with. How many of your doubts were planted by people who never wanted you to think for yourself. But the moment you reclaim your mind, you become dangerous in the best possible way. Not aggressive, not reactive, but centered, independent, clear. And clarity, once truly owned, doesn't ask for the world to follow. It simply walks and watches who keeps up. You were never meant to be a prisoner of noise. Your mind was built to be a sanctuary. Guard it like your life depends on it, because it does. If this journey toward lucid thinking resonated with you, show the algorithm this is the content you value. Hit the like button for Stoic Mindset Mastery. It genuinely helps. And let me know in the comments, what is the single biggest obstacle to clear thinking in your life right now? Your journey continues now.